could now be facing an unaffordable inheritance tax bill of £1 million solely due to this government's catastrophic family farm tax. Mr. Speaker, Charles, like many other farmers, despite the Minister's saying differently, they across the country are fearing for their livelihoods, their way of life, their futures, the food security. Will they scrap the family farm tax?
I want to reiterate, our reforms mean that the majority of those claiming the relief will not be affected. And as my colleague, the Farming Minister, confirmed, there will be no change and no U-turn on inheritance tax. This policy strikes a fair balance. The chaos that the Tories left means that this is fixing our public finances while protecting our rural communities.
I'll listen.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll answer questions 2 and 9 together. Economic growth is the #1 priority for this government. The UK was the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of this year. Wages are up. Inward investment is up, inactivity is down on the year, and interest rates are down. This is a Labour government that is delivering for working people all across Wales and the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's brilliant that last month a total of £214 million was invested in communities across Wales as part of the government's Pride in Place scheme. In my patch, I was delighted that earlier this year Scarborough was awarded £20 million through the Plan for Neighbourhoods. This will give local people the power to decide how funding will transform our town. Will the Secretary of State update the House on how funds such as these will boost local economic growth and restore pride in our communities?
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question? Through the Pride in Place initiatives, we are putting power and resources directly into the hands of local communities, from Conway to Carmarthenshire, giving them the ability to decide the priorities that matter most and the funding to pay for visible and lasting change. And in Wales, 14 communities will benefit from £20 million of investment, alongside a further £34.5 million benefiting every single local authority across Wales. Together, these investments will help revitalise high streets, improve public spaces and community facilities, a central part of our mission to boost the economy and break down barriers to opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the MP for the very centre of London and the MP for Paddington Station, I know just how interconnected our country is and just how interconnected our economies are. We're focused on job creation. This is in stark contrast to the nationalist parties of Reform and Plaid. Will the Secretary of State update us on their impact on the impact of their damaging independence plans?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Plaid Cymru's disastrous plans for independence are going to cost Wales £21.5 billion every single year. That's over £11,000 for every working-age person in Wales, or over £7,000 for every single adult and child in Wales every single year. People of Wales deserve to know what public services they will cut or what taxes they would raise to pay for their divisive separatist plans.
Ben Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister please explain to family businesses, because it's not just farmers who are terrified for the future of their family businesses, it's lots of other family businesses. If under the BPR, the business property relief, a company that's worth, say, 20 million would have to pay £4 million in tax. Yet that doesn't fall on the business, does it, Minister? It falls on the person who inherits that business. So they will have to extract another £4 million, pay that tax in order to do it, crippling family businesses, crippling investment and hurting growth in Wales. That's true, isn't it?
It's certainly not, because business confidence, he will have heard of tax planning, and so will the people that he's been talking about. As I say, investment is up in Wales. We've had record inward investment in Wales, a 23% increase on the previous financial year, 30% increase in jobs created. The UK is the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of this year. Businesses are growing and developing and creating jobs under this government.
Secretary of State, Minister Davis.
Under the watch of the current Secretary of State, opportunities for young people are now unbelievably dire. Unemployment, despite what she says, is rising and employment is falling, and this situation is not good enough for the next generation in Wales. Last week, my colleague Darren Miller, who is our leader of the Senedd group, met the Welsh First Minister. Anyone know who that is, though? Offering to potentially support the Welsh Government's budget, provided Labour ministers agreed to scrapping Welsh stamp duty. Mr Speaker, it would help young people onto the property ladder in Wales, where it's the hardest to achieve, and boost the Welsh economy. Will the Minister confirm she agrees with scrapping Welsh stamp duty? And if so, what measures has she taken to persuade Baroness Morgan of Ely to scrap the tax in Wales?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, I'm very glad that she knows the name of the Welsh Conservative leader in the Senedd, because clearly her colleague, the Shadow Home Secretary, doesn't. And they must have ended their fight about who is the actual leader. But what I would say is we are delivering for the people of Wales. We have ended Tory austerity, largest budget settlement in the history of devolution, nearly £5 billion extra to spend on public services over the next 3 years. We're creating jobs. We've increased the minimum and national living wage for 160,000 Welsh workers. We are fixing the foundations of the chaos that her party left behind.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Very on, Mr Lefarydd. Please allow me first to congratulate Lindsay Whittle on his seismic victory in Caerphilly. And in doing so, I pay tribute to the late Hefin David, whose service to his community was deeply respected. As Mr Whittle has said, he'll be a hard act to follow. I will never fill his shoes, but I promise I will walk the same path that he did. The results, Mr Speaker, showed that people in Wales seek real change. So in her capacity as the Secretary of State of the Wales Office, what measures is she taking to press the Labour Chancellor to include measures that benefit Wales in the autumn budget?
Can I thank my right honourable friend for her words about our late colleague Hefin David. I want to congratulate Lindsay Whittle on his victory on becoming a Senedd member, and I'm sure he will work very hard for his Caerphilly constituency for the next 6 months. As she will know, I'm not going to comment on discussions between myself and the Chancellor ahead of the budget. She'll have to wait to see what the Chancellor says on the 26th of November.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Nonetheless, I think we all know that the autumn budget risks falling short of tackling the deep poverty and the lack of opportunities that still scar far too many Welsh communities. We need to tax income from wealth fairly, scrap the 2-child limit, ensure that families have the support they need to cope with rising costs. So she tells me to wait for the budget. Perhaps she would therefore be prepared for once to meet with me to discuss Plaid Cymru's proposals for a fairer, more ambitious UK budget, one that actually works for Wales. Will she meet with me?
I'm very happy to meet the right honourable lady.
Oh, it's Dave Dugan.
Question 3, Mr Speaker.
What have we got now?
Mr Speaker, I have regular discussions with the Chancellor and Treasury Ministers on a wide range of issues, including the cost of living. This Labour government is on the side of working people, and it's why we've already taken action by increasing the national minimum wage and the national living wage for 160,000 workers across Wales. We've frozen fuel duty and extended the warm homes discount. There is more to do. We're determined to put more money into people's pockets right across Wales.
Dave Dugan.
A century of Labour taking the people of Wales for granted came crashing down last week with the sensational victory of Plaid's Lindsay Whittle in Caerphilly, with Labour reduced to third place. And why would anybody accept any more Labour as Labour's cost of living soars, as Labour's Westminster perma-crisis deepens, and as 700,000 people in Wales live under Labour's poverty prospectus? So she won't say what she's going to speak to the Chancellor about, but does she think the Chancellor is ready or willing to help the people of Wales? Because the people of Wales feel abandoned by Labour over the last 5 decades.
I'm not sure whether the honourable member has ever been to Caerphilly or even to Wales, but If he has, that's good. If he hasn't, he needs to be careful about what he's saying about the people in Wales. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So absolutely does not know what he talks about. And his party's record in Scotland is nothing to boast about. And Nationalists will divide the United Kingdom, costing Wales £21.5 billion every single year.
Chair of the committee, Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I welcome the news last month that Newport City Council and Caerphilly County Borough Council both received £21.5 million each from the UK Labour Government Pride in Place scheme. This funding will empower communities across my constituency of Newport West and Isloin to invest in community assets, their local high streets, drive local growth and create jobs, thus reducing the cost of living. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that at last in Wales we have two Labour governments delivering for the people of Wales?
The Chair of the Welsh Affairs Select Committee is absolutely right. Our Pride in Place programmes, the Local Growth Fund, the City and Growth Deals, the investment zones and our free ports are all the result of having two Labour governments working together for the benefit of everyone across Wales. And taken together, they will boost the economy, draw in further investment, create thousands of jobs and raise living standards across Wales. They demonstrate this government's commitment to growth, practical, visible, long-term investment that empowers local communities and delivers real benefits for them.
Anne Davies.
Question number 4, please, Speaker.
Mr Speaker, overhead lines are much cheaper to build. Undergrounding costs an estimated 4.5 times more than overhead lines, according to the Institution of Engineering and Technology. Overhead lines are also quicker to build, cause less environmental damage and are much easier to maintain. The cost of building this infrastructure is borne by electricity bill payers, and Plaid's policy on undergrounding will not only increase bills, but suffocate the economic potential of Wales's green industrial revolution.
Davies.
Diolch, Mr Llefarydd. My constituency is the location of two major infrastructure projects, a 97-kilometre and a 60-kilometre network of pylons along several hundred, 248 actually, 230-metre tall wind turbines. The cumulative impact of these projects is significant, occupying land that could support other development, and it remains unclear whether they will lower electricity bills or improve electricity connectivity for local households nor businesses. What discussions has the Secretary of State had with the Welsh Government to ensure that these projects deliver genuine benefits for our communities?
I heard what the Honourable Lady said, but we do have a policy to ensure that communities who host clean energy infrastructure can directly benefit. The new Community Funds Guidance aims to improve the consistency in the amount of funding for communities that could be used towards local projects. And on bill discounts, we're introducing a scheme which will provide household discounts to those living closest to new and significantly upgraded transmission infrastructure projects.
Henry Tufton.
Mr Speaker, I like my constituency neighbour, and Plaid want to be taken seriously as a party of government, but they fail to recognise the importance that renewable energy will play. Does the Secretary of State agree with Renewable Cymru, who recently concluded that Plaid's approach will cost jobs and investment in communities like mine in Pembrokeshire?
Labour is the only party that is committed to investing in renewable energy, energy that will bring down bills, create thousands of jobs for people right across Wales. Plaid and Reform are against renewable infrastructure. Plaid and the SNP don't want nuclear. Their economy spokesperson, Plaid's economy spokesperson in the Senedd, is anti-nuclear. They're happy to see people pay higher bills, they're happy to spurn investment, and they're happy to see job opportunities slashed.
David Chadwick, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. During the Second World War, over 200 people were forced to leave their homes and give up their land in the Epint, when more than half the community was taken for use by the Ministry of Defence. And the people of the Epint understood why that sacrifice had to be made. But now, Butte Energy and their wealthy investment backers want to take the rest of the Epint. Does the Secretary of State agree that the Epint has already sacrificed enough, And will she work with me to defend the Welsh countryside from once again having its wealth extracted from it with no benefit to local communities?
It sounds like the Liberal Democrats in Wales have the same position as Plaid Cymru. Our priority is to drive growth, lower bills and create jobs through our new green energy revolution, and that includes people in his constituency. Investment in his constituency should be something that he should be welcoming.
Rebecca Smith.
Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
We inherited a broken asylum system in absolute chaos from the party opposite, with tens of thousands stuck in the system, dependent on expensive asylum hotels. We are committed to ending the use of hotels as asylum accommodation as soon as possible and before the end of this Parliament as part of a controlled, managed and orderly programme.
Rebecca Smith.
Under the Welsh Labour government, waiting lists, educational standards and opportunities for young people have all ground to an abrupt halt. It is shocking, therefore, that the Labour Welsh government isn't prioritising these issues, which would make a real difference to the people of Wales. Instead, Labour ministers supported by Plaid Cymru are ploughing tens of millions of pounds into its nation of sanctuary policy that is believed to support services for some illegal immigrants. Does the Honourable Lady agree with me it is high time her colleagues scrapped this wasteful, non-devolved policy and instead focus their time on lowering NHS waiting times and improving standards in the
It sounds like the member opposite doesn't agree with welcoming the thousands of Ukrainian refugees, which the UK government's nation of sanctuary has largely supported. And that has been used to welcome Ukrainian families fleeing from Russian aggression, a cause which I understood her party supported.
Chris Evans.
Mr. Speaker, can I associate myself with the remarks of the Leader of Plaid Cymru and paying tribute to Kevin David, my friend and colleague. I will say this, he was an amazing representative for Wales and a real warrior for those who found themselves neurodivergent or on the margins of society. I'm also delighted, Mr. Speaker, that Caerphilly is so popular today. It seems so many people only visited the constituency several times, or not at all, have only read about it in the press, have become experts about my constituency. And I am also pleased that the Minister raised today the plight of the Ukrainians, because if there is who came to Wales and seek sanctuary running from war. Because if there was one downside to that by-election, it was the talk of asylum seekers being bad people, that they're all illegal, they don't contribute to anything. And I say to those people, come and see the exhibition that was on in Refugee Council and see what they contributed and what message does the Minister have for the Ukrainians who are still seeking asylum in Wales.
Minute.
Thank you. We offer sanctuary for those who desperately need it, and we are proud of that. But we inherited a broken system from the party opposite, contracts that are inherited, hotel use since the last election has nearly halved, and we have removed 30,000 people who have no right to be here, ensuring that those who do need to be here do have the welcome and support that they need. This is not job done, but work in progress. Compare that to the last 14 years of the Tory government.
Mims Davies, Shadow Secretary of State.
So after wantonly scrapping the Rwanda scheme, the Labour government is now overseeing record-breaking figures of illegal immigrants and reported the scandal was now engulfing North Wales, where more than 200 illegal immigrants tried to gain entry to the country on ferries from Dublin to Holyhead. Meanwhile, Penelli military camp in southwest Wales was previously condemned by Labour Welsh Government. It appears their current policy, along with reforms, is from boats to barracks, which is happening in Scotland and Sussex. Yet Plaid say that there is no such thing as illegal immigration. Can the Minister agree with me that both her government and Plaid have no idea or interest in how to make our borders safe?
I feel the party opposite forgets about the chaos that they created. We have inherited a broken system, inherited from 14 years of chaos, in contracts that we have to honour from the last government, but in the last year, we have halved the use of hotels. We have removed 30,000 people who have no right to be here. This is not job done, as I say, but it is work in progress, and compare that work in just 1 year to 14 years of chaos under her party's government.
Catherine Folks.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
From bench number 6, Minister.
We are investing at least £445 million into Welsh Rail to right years of underfunding by previous governments. This will mean new stations, more and faster trains along the key lines, improve cross-border connectivity, create jobs and boost economic growth.
I thank the Minister for the investment of £445 million, which will be a fundamental driver of economic growth and connectivity in South Wales. What actions is the Minister taking with Cabinet colleagues and industry partners to ensure that a new station serving my constituents in Megra and Undy will be delivered without delay, getting my constituents on track and faster towards their destinations?
Yeah. I thank my honourable friend. She has been a strong champion for this rail investment, which is key to unlocking Wales's economic potential. This includes funding to progress the 5 burn stations in Cardiff East, Newport West, Somerton, Llanwern, Magor and Undy. I will continue to work with the Welsh Rail Board, Welsh Government, to ensure the communities she represents get the infrastructure that they need.
Asper Brandreth.
The huge economic potential of both the northwest of England and North Wales is being held back by poor rail infrastructure. The last Conservative government committed to at least £1 billion to upgrade and electrify the railway lines from Crewe and Warrington through Chester into North Wales. This Labour government has scrapped those transformational plans at a time when economic growth is a priority. Will she seek to reinstate the vital rail infrastructure investment in the Mersey-Dean North Wales region?
Well, that money just didn't exist. And we are investing a historic £445 million into Welsh Rail to right years of underfunding by previous governments and unleashing Wales' economic potential. This will mean new stations, faster trains on key lines and connecting people, well-paid and better jobs right across Wales. 2 governments working in partnership to deliver for the people of Wales.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, can I welcome in the gallery the Honourable Speaker of the Parliament of Sri Lanka and his delegation. We now come to questions to Prime Minister Nick Smith.
Number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the scenes of destruction emerging from Jamaica are truly shocking. Both the Foreign Secretary and I have been in close contact with our Jamaican counterparts in recent days to offer the UK's full support. Mr. Speaker, I can update the House that HMS Trent and specialist rapid deployment teams are pre-positioned in the region, and we stand ready to provide humanitarian support. Mr. Speaker, Awab Ishaq died 5 years ago from a respiratory condition caused by exposure to black mould in his flat in Rochdale. He was just 2 years old. No child should grow up without the safety and security of a decent home. For far too long, millions of people have lived at the mercy of rogue landlords and insecure contracts. Labour is ending that. Despite the best efforts of the Tories and Reform who voted against it, our Renters' Rights Act is now law, including Awab's law. Fighting for working people, that's the difference a Labour government makes. And on that issue, Mr. Speaker, this government has secured the biggest deal to manufacture Typhoon fighter jets in this country for almost 20 years. We secured that deal because the UK is back as a leading and trusted member of NATO. A timely reminder for the Green Party, whose policy is to take us out of NATO, the Putin-friendly Reform Party, who would have no standing with NATO, and for the leader of the opposition, you don't win NATO deals by not turning up to NATO summits. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about supporting Jamaica? Across our country and in Blaenau Gwent and Rumney, off-road bikers are a menace. They tear up our environment and turn our streets into racetracks. After years of Tory cuts, Gwent police are tackling this now. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that police forces and communities like mine are seeing the difference that Labour can make in power?
Well, I share my honourable friend's determination that everyone feels safe and secure in their community. Neighbourhood policing was decimated by the party opposite, and we're restoring it with 3,000 extra officers by spring. We're also giving them the powers, Mr Speaker, they need, including tough new respect orders that allow the police to seize and destroy vehicles within 48 hours. The Tories walked through the lobbies with reform in voting against our crime and policing bill.
The opposition, Kemi Bernal.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last year, in its manifesto, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance, and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm glad that the Leader of the Opposition is now finally talking about the economy. I can update the House, Mr Speaker. Retail sales are higher than expected. Inflation is lower than expected. Growth has been upgraded this year. And, Mr Speaker, the UK stock market is at an all-time high. The budget is on the 26th of November, and we will lay out our plans. But I can tell the House now that we will build a stronger economy, we will cut NHS waiting lists and deliver a better future for our country.
Well, Mr Speaker, yes. What a fascinating answer. It is not the same answer that I received when I asked exactly the same question, word for word, on the 9th of July. Then the Prime Minister replied with just one word, yes, and then he sat down with a smug grin on his face. What's changed in the past 4 months?
Mr Speaker, as she well knows, no Prime Minister or Chancellor will ever set out their plans in advance. But, Mr Speaker, I can say this, Mr Speaker, because the figures on the productivity review that's being undertaken, this is a judgment on their record in office. Those figures are now coming through, and they confirm that the Tories did even more damage to the economy than we previously thought. Now, we will turn that around. We've already delivered the fastest growth in the G7 in the first half of this year. 5 interest rate cuts in a row. Trade deals with the US, EU and India. They broke the economy. We're fixing it.
Mr Speaker, he says no Prime Minister or Chancellor will say these things before the budget. Has he told his Chancellor? Because she's been out there flying kites, causing constant speculation around the budget that is damaging the economy. All week, they've been briefing about tax rises. What we've heard is that he does not have a plan. So we have some ideas for him. Yes. Yesterday, they can... Yes. Mr Speaker, it's quite clear that they need some ideas. Yes. On this side of the House, we believe in scrapping taxes on family homes. Yesterday, we voted to abolish stamp duty. They voted against it. Even the Deputy Prime Minister, or the former Deputy Prime Minister, who resigned in disgrace for not paying stamp duty, voted to keep it. So, Mr Speaker, I will remind them, on this side of the House, we know that abolishing stamp duty is how we get young people on the housing ladder and get the economy growing. So why won't he scrap this terrible tax?
Why didn't they do it then in 14 years in office? Mr Speaker, as I said, the productivity review figures are now coming in, and they show the true extent of the damage that they did. And she asked us to take advice from them. We all know, these figures are coming out, we all know that austerity damaged the economy on their watch. The botched Brexit deal damaged the economy on their watch. Liz Truss's mini-budget damaged the economy on their watch. so we'll take no lectures or advice from them on the economy. They won't be trusted on the economy for generations to come. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why at our budget, I can be clear, there will be no return to austerity. That's what broke the country. No return to the instability of their mad borrowing spree, and we'll end the unfairness and low growth that squeeze living standards for working people. That's the path to national renewal.
Mr. Speaker, Conservatives reduced the deficit every year until the pandemic. We more than doubled the personal allowance. We left 4 million more jobs than we found from Labour. We brought inflation down to 2%. It's nearly double.
Mr Tufnell, you're in my sights. The pantomime season has arrived, so don't start it too early.
Mr. Speaker, on our record, we brought inflation down to 2%. It has doubled under him. We left him the fastest growing economy in the G7. It is no longer. The truth is, they have no ideas. We're giving them some. There is another way to get growth. It's cutting welfare spending and getting people into work. Last month, I offered to work cross-party with him to bring down welfare spending, because he knows, and we know, that he'd rather dip into people's pockets than upset those people behind him. Instead of tax rises, will he work with us to find a way to cut welfare spending and get Britain working again?
Mr. Speaker, she talks about their record. Let's go through it. They crashed the economy. Inflation went up to 11%. Mortgages went through the roof. Welfare spending went up £33 billion on them, and they want to give us advice. And they reduced the UK to a laughing stock. Because of our budget, Mr. Speaker, waiting lists have come down, wages are up, mortgage rates are down, and other countries want to do deals with us. Just on Monday of this week, the Turkish government signed an £8 billion deal for typhoons. Earlier this year, the Norway government a £10 billion for frigates. That is because of the budget that we passed, fixing the mess that they left.
Mr. Speaker, it's not because of the budget that he passed. I started that deal back in January 2024. But I welcome it. There are some things, Mr. Speaker, it's got nothing to do with their budget. We're lucky it's still happening. So I welcome the £8 billion deal that he's done with Turkey, but I will remind him that just last month, his Chancellor borrowed £20 billion. He'll have to sell a hell of a lot more jets to make up for that. And he won't rule out any tax rises. He can't cut spending. He is increasing unemployment. This man knows nothing about economic growth except how to destroy it. In his weakness, Mr. Speaker, he has caved into the unions with their regulations that will cripple businesses, costing them £5 billion every year. Yes, please do speak up, because I want every single business out there to hear Labour MPs heckling when we talk about the damage that they are doing. So I ask the Prime Minister, how on earth can he consider adding more burdens for these firms to deal with?
Mr. Speaker, she's overlooked the fact that we had the highest growth in the G7 the first 6 months of this year, and that growth's just been upgraded. 3 interest rate cuts. Mr. Speaker, we're not going to take lessons from them. She's now introduced what I understand to be, I think she calls it a golden economic rule, this golden rule that she's now putting forward, very golden. £47 billion, Mr. Speaker, of unspecified spending cuts, with no detail whatsoever. Mr. Speaker, let me put that in context. That would be 85,000 fewer nurses, 234,000 fewer teachers, or cutting every police officer in the country twice over. No wonder the Institute for Government said she's on shaky foundations. That's exactly what caused the problem in the first place.
Mr. Speaker, the fact that he has to stand there and make stuff up just shows what kind of Prime Minister he is. We had an itemised list. We had an itemised list of 47 billion. 23 billion was on welfare spending, which I asked him to work with us to cut. He refuses to do so. All he knows how to do is tax, tax, tax. If you work, they tax you more. If you save, they tax you more. If you buy a home, they tax you more. None of these taxes were in the manifesto, which he had 4 years to prepare. Mr. Speaker, he is raising taxes because he is too weak to control spending. He's blaming us, he's blaming the OBR. Last week they were blaming Brexit. Isn't the truth that with this Prime Minister, it's always someone else's fault?
They were kicked out of office because they broke the economy. They won't be trusted for years to come. She can't tell us what her position is on the last budget, and she's got a phantom £47 billion with no foundation as we go forward. That's exactly the mess that they caused. They've not changed one bit. Meanwhile, we're fixing their mess. 5 million extra NHS appointments, 5 interest rate cuts, growth and wages up. That's a change the Labour government makes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Palestinians try and rebuild their lives amid the rubble of Gaza, last night, once again, dozens of innocent people were killed by Israeli airstrikes. What will the UK do, along with our international partners, to hold the Netanyahu government to account for its actions? And what more can we do to ensure that aid gets in, as the IDF blocks aid in breach of both the peace agreement and international law?
Well, I thank him for raising this, and I'm deeply concerned, Mr. Speaker, by the strikes, and that underlines the fragility of the ceasefire deal. All sides need to uphold President Trump's peace plan. It is the only route to long-term peace for Israelis and Palestinians. We are, of course, in close touch with the US and regional allies, pushing for de-escalation. Mr. Speaker, the scale of destruction in Gaza is unimaginable. The immediate priority remains getting aid in at the speed and the volume needed. Thank you.
We come to the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with what the Prime Minister said about Jamaica and indeed all those islands and countries affected by Hurricane Melissa? Our thoughts and prayers are with all those affected. And I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in paying tribute to Prunella Scales, Mr. Speaker. I suspect I'm not the only member of the House with a Fawlty Towers DVD box set. She will be greatly missed. Mr. Speaker, across Europe, in countries like Poland, Germany and France, we've seen evidence of dangerous Russian interference in their politics. Last month, the former leader of a major party in Wales pleaded guilty to taking bribes to make pro-Russian statements. The evidence shows Nathan Gill was a close confidant of the current Reform Party leader for years. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's time we had an in-depth investigation into Russian meddling and money in British politics?
Joining his comments on Prunella Scales, and on this question of Russian interference, it is a serious problem in countries across Europe, including in our country, where it's a constant threat. And Mr. Speaker, for NATO allies, the conflict in Ukraine and dealing with Russian aggression is the #1 issue. And that is why I have to say the Reform Party would be an absolute disaster for our defence. We are a trusted member of NATO. We wouldn't be a trusted member if we were Putin friendly. We are leading the coalition of the willing, giving security and comfort to 30 other countries that would collapse under reform because they're Putin friendly, and it'd be a real threat to our defence and our security.
Sir Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the Prime Minister's reply, and I agree with him on Ukraine, but I do hope he will look at an investigation into this Russian interference in our politics. Mr. Speaker, last week I questioned how he can accept the damage of Brexit while refusing to do anything meaningful about it. The damage is clear, with the Financial Times reporting that lower productivity growth alone has blown a £20 billion black hole in the public finances, just part of the Brexit black hole that Conservatives and Reform will not apologise for. Last week, he rejected my plan for a new customs union. So can I ask him what action he will take to change the Brexit deal, or is he just planning to complain about it?
Well, he must have overlooked the fact that there was a UK-EU summit earlier this year in which there were 10 strands to the change that we've already agreed in relation to relationship with the EU, including closer trading relationships, including closer work on defence and security, and that is an iterative process that we will continue into next year. But he's absolutely right about the botched deal of the last government, the damage that's done to our economy, and we're just seeing some of the figures coming through in relation to that. That's one of the reasons, or one of the factors behind the way they crashed the economy.
Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Football is a game
based on fairness, yet brilliant clubs that unite communities every week like Hartlepool are being held back by a fundamental unfairness. The 3 Up campaign, backed by 72 National League clubs, including Hartlepool United, and championed by Hartlepool legend Jeff Stelling, seeks to grant a 3rd promotion place from the National League to League 2. This simple change will be transformational for these historic clubs, many of which are over a century old. Now, while I accept Arsenal may never directly benefit from such a change, does the Prime Minister agree that this campaign to put football first would help the new football regulator protect club heritage, ensure stability and put fairness and fans back at the heart of our game?
Well, can I start by wishing Hartlepool United the best for this season? He will appreciate the structure of the leagues is a matter for leagues themselves, but I do commend his campaign and everything that he's putting behind it. I also want to pay tribute to the staff, the fans and the players at Sheffield Wednesday at this difficult time. Mr. Speaker, we've delivered the independent football regulator to stand up for fans and make sure clubs have fit and proper owners. The party opposite used to support that, but now they oppose it.
Gavin Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has a deep understanding of policing in Northern Ireland and the importance of it. He knows about the ongoing national security threat. Indeed, he knows about the additional costs of dealing with the legacy of our past. And he knows that the PSNI has been underfunded. He knows that the Northern Ireland Executive have rightly brought forward a stability programme for them. He knows that they are under strength, because New Decade, New Approach in 2020 suggested there should be 7,500 police officers in Northern Ireland. Today there are 6,200. But does he know that the Treasury did not look favourably upon a request to draw upon the reserves for a data breach cost of £120 million? Does he recognise that in Treasury terms that incident was unpredictable, it was unforeseeable, it's unaffordable? It matches the criteria that the Treasury have. To set aside that money in a year would be 10% of the overall PSNI budget. It is not affordable. Can I ask him, in engagement with the Chancellor, to think about this issue again and to ensure that our police service of Northern Ireland and the national security threat that they face is not hampered by in-year financial rules?
Well, can I thank him for raising this important issue, and I know it is of a real concern to him. Can I reassure him that I am in regular contact with the Chief Constable, John Boucher, and the PSNI on this very issue, as he would expect. As he's aware, we provided a record settlement for the Executive, £19.3 billion per year on average. We also invested £113 million in additional security funding for the PSNI to help address specific security challenges. Now, whilst it's for the Executive to set the PSNI budget, I want to reassure him that our commitment is to keeping people safe in Northern Ireland.
Alan Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking on behalf of my constituents, Shannon and Tyler, who lost their 2-year-old son, Hudson, earlier this year. Worried about their son and calling 111, they were told he had gastroenteritis. In fact, Hudson had a twisted bowel and a few days later, after being rushed to hospital, tragically died. Mr. Speaker, Shannon and Tyler are full of praise for the NHS medical staff who worked so hard to save their son's life. They just wish they'd been offered an in-person appointment sooner, which might have given a more accurate diagnosis. They want Hudson's legacy to be better access to face-to-face NHS appointments for children under 5, so other families don't face this tragic situation, and their online petition on this matter has gained over 80,000 signatures. Will the Prime Minister join me in sending the best wishes of this House to Hudson's family? And will he ensure they meet a health minister to discuss their courageous campaign?
Well, can I thank him for raising this tragic case? And I'm sure I speak for the whole House in saying we send our sympathies and thoughts to Hudson's parents, Shannon and Tyler. And I'll make sure that they get the meeting that he's asking for. This is exactly why we're working to improve access to face-to-face appointments for those that want one. And to enable that, we've delivered the largest cash uplift for GPs in a decade, put over 2,500 GPs into general practice, and we're upgrading 1,000 surgeries to deliver 8 million more appointments.
James McMurdo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, earlier this week, I got to see the very best and some of the worst of our National Health Service. When my own daughter needed them, they were there. but when an 89-year-old gentleman in the restaurant I was eating in collapsed, it took over an hour and 15 minutes between my first call and the arrival of 2 exhausted paramedics. Basildon Hospital has just been downgraded to inadequate in the latest Care Quality Commission. Can I please invite the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, or the Prime Minister herself if he has time in his schedule, to come and visit Basildon with me so we can both thank them for the exceptional work they do, but also get to grips with the problems they're facing.
Well, can I thank you for raising this case and the 2 examples that he's given. The downgrade at Basildon Hospital is deeply disappointing. The Care Quality Commission has set out immediate actions for the Trust leaders to deliver improvements. Our decisions in government have seen £26 billion boost for our NHS, helping deliver over 5 million extra appointments. I would gently point out that he was elected representing a reform party that would dismantle our NHS and charge people to see their doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Reform say they stand up for the working class, but the truth is they never have. No. They voted to block the Employment Rights Bill again and again. So does the Prime Minister agree that it's only this government on the side of working people? It's Labour creating tens of thousands of jobs, like with our deal with Turkey. It's Labour getting rid of 0 hours contracts, and it's Labour protecting workers from unfair dismissal from day one.
I'm proud that we delivered the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and the Tories and Reform vote against it at every turn, as they always do with any form of workers' rights and protections. And in relation to the deal that we struck on Monday, Mr. Speaker, with Turkey, that is a deal worth £8 billion, 20,000 jobs, 10 years of work in manufacturing with the typhoons. That is only possible because we're a trusted member of NATO, and Reform have been an absolute nightmare on defence because they would not be a trusted member of NATO because they're Putin friendly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Targets for cancer patients beginning treatment within 62 days hasn't been met by any NHS trust for 10 years, a legacy of the last Conservative government. If this target had been met in every month of 2025, so far nearly 3,000 breast cancer patients would have started their treatment on time. Will the Prime Minister ensure that the National Cancer Plan, which I asked for a year ago, makes it possible for the 62-day target to be met, along with recruiting much-needed cancer specialists and replacing outdated equipment?
Yes. Well, I thank him for raising this, and I know this is personal to him. We are investing £600 million to improve diagnostic capacity and rolling out new radiotherapy machines, including in his local trust, I'm pleased to say. We have seen real improvements. 148,000 more people now have cancer diagnosed or ruled out within 28 days, but I acknowledge there is more to do on this. The National Cancer Plan will set out how we will go further and deliver the best care for every patient.
Mr. Speaker, the big 4 banks have been allowed to abandon our high streets, basically closing them with impunity. Between 1999 and 2025, my constituency alone has lost banks at Guildhurst, Newbign-by-the-Sea, Bedlington and Blythe. And this, Mr. Speaker, is at the same time these banks made more than £40 billion profit in last year in cash. The manifesto pledge to roll out 350 banking hubs is to be welcomed, but its quirky, almost bizarre qualifying criteria needs detailed revision. Will the Prime Minister commit to a wholesale review of personal face-to-face banking, which would enable local residents and local businesses, alongside many vulnerable people, to access their own money in their own time on their own high street?
Well, can I thank you for raising this? And I know how important face-to-face banking is on our high streets. We have committed, as he says, to rolling out 350 banking hubs across the United Kingdom. Over 180 are already open. I want to reassure him that 350 is not the limit. While decisions over hubs are taken independently, they can be rolled out wherever a community needs one. And I'm happy to make sure the relevant Minister follows up with details for him.
I will.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud that the last government introduced the triple lock and we're committed to keeping it. But from...
The problem is one or two you're trying to catch my eye. If we don't get through, you won't get a chance, might we?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was a great achievement of the last government and we will be keeping it. But from April, pensioners with private pensions as low as £2 a month will be paying income tax for the first time. Now, last year's budget, the Chancellor was clear that extending the freeze on personal allowances would breach their manifesto commitment. So will the Prime Minister prove the media speculation wrong, keep his promise and guarantee that there will be no extension to the freeze on personal allowances?
The freeze was introduced by them. That's why it's coming in next year.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for West Suffolk, when he was an official, produced a devastating report on the Home Office. Reading it, it shows a department characterised by disarray and defeatism. There have been 12 Home Secretaries over the last 30 years, some better than others, but none have managed to get this department in order to deliver the services that people should expect in this country. Will the Prime Minister give the new Home Secretary the necessary resources and policy interventions to make sure that she can be successful?
Yes, she's bearing down on the challenges the Home Office, most of them inherited from the last government, and we will make the changes necessary, and I have every confidence in the Secretary of State to do so.
Fan of the House, Edward Lee.
After all the hatreds in the world today, wasn't it a lovely moment to see the King and the Pope pray together in the Sistine Chapel? Doesn't it give us hope that these historic divisions can be resolved? And doesn't it give us hope that despite the fact that Ukraine and Gaza may seem intractable problems, if we have the will to preserve the freedom of all people to live in their own country, and if we have the will to have faith in our common humanity, these problems can be resolved and we can win through.
Can I agree with him? I thought the King and the Pope praying together was an incredible message to the world and very, very powerful. And I agree with him that if we all work together, we can actually bring people together, notwithstanding the very many difficulties and challenges that poses around the world and in our own country. It's why, so far as we can, we should be uniting on national patriotic renewal in this country, rather than the toxic division that we see on some of the benches opposite.
Daniel Zeitner.
Mr. Speaker, Cambridge is one of the most intensive science and innovation sectors clusters in the world, and that success is based on openness to talent. Now, at the moment, in many American universities, there are many well-qualified people pondering their futures. What a fantastic opportunity, but it is a global competition. So can I ask the Prime Minister what our government is doing to make their destination of choice the United Kingdom?
Well, my honourable friend's constituency is just one example of why the United Kingdom is a world leader in educating and attracting the brightest minds. Our immigration white paper includes changes to make sure more of the world's best graduates and entrepreneurs start their careers and their businesses here. Mr. Speaker, we're also boosting our R&D sector with more than £86 billion, making sure we continue to attract the best and the brightest.
Alison Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last weekend, I spoke to Paul, who runs Bar Humbug Sweets in Littlehampton. And yesterday, I heard from Matt, a tech entrepreneur whose British company employs thousands worldwide. Their businesses couldn't be more different, but they both told me the same thing. This government is piling on new taxes, regulation and costs that make it harder to create jobs, invest and grow. So when will the Prime Minister stop choking opportunity and start backing the people who create jobs in the first place.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our small business plan was widely welcomed by small businesses across the country, not least because of their input into it. But she complains about the measures we had to take at the last budget, including national insurance. It says chose to take. They still can't say whether they'd reverse them. They know nothing about the damage they did to our economy.
Janet Davey.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm wearing all black today, and that's to demonstrate my sorrow due to a fatal stabbing that took place in my constituency yesterday. Now, we all know that one death is one death far too many, but I've had 2 deaths in my constituency in the last few weeks. My community needs reassurance. Knife crime must end. Can the Prime Minister say what more his government is doing to tackle knife crime?
Well, can I thank her for raising these tragic cases which have a huge impact on families, friends and communities. And I know that she's a passionate and dedicated campaigner on this issue. Every single life that's lost to knife crime devastates communities, and that's why we've banned zombie knives and ninja swords and have strengthened controls on online knife sales. Mr. Speaker, we're also giving stronger powers for police in our crime and policing bill, which both the Conservatives and Reform voted against.
Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had the recent privilege to visit Fitzwarren School in my Oxfordshire constituents, Didcot and Wantage, the only special school that we have, and see the excellent care and education that they provide. Given the urgent need for more funding for additional special schools and to enable special schools to spread their expertise to mainstream schools, what does the Prime Minister say to parents and education workers who are desperately worried by his government's decision announced last week to delay SEND reforms?
Well, I'm grateful for him raising this, and I think the broken SEND system is the issue that's been raised with me more frequently than any other issue at Prime Minister's questions. That's why we do need to review it. It's not working for any of those involved, particularly children and parents. It is important that we get it right, and insofar as we can, that we get a consensus about how we go forward, and that's what we're attempting to do.
Mr. Speaker, a 4th patient has entered the glioblastoma drug trial set up in memory of my late sister. Today, we are joined by Ben Trotman, a patient of a similar trial in 2022, funded by the John Moulton Foundation. Since then, Ben has married Emily, and in March they welcomed beautiful baby Mabel. Can I ask the Prime Minister when the National Institute for Health Research will spend the 40 million given in 2017 for trials on brain tumours? Or will glioblastoma patients always rely on the grief-stricken or philanthropist for life and hope?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I begin by paying tribute to her sister Margaret, who was a guiding figure in the Labour Party, and the powerful legacy that she left in helping us to tackle brain cancer. We are determined to improve cancer survival rates and hit all NHS waiting times in relation to cancer, so no patient waits longer than they should. And that's why we're investing £1.5 billion in new surgical hubs and diagnostic scanners to help deliver over 30,000 more procedures and over 1.2 million diagnostic tests.
Final question, Caroline John.
Mr. Speaker. I recently met around 20 independent local traders in Totnes who are furious that the last bank in town will close in January and that Link have refused to consider a banking hub. My businesses and constituents, 1,100 of whom have signed a petition, deserve better. Now, the Prime Minister has just told the member for Blyth and Ashington that a banking hub can be rolled out wherever a community needs one. So will he now back my campaign, ask his ministers to write to Link and instruct them to grant a banking hub to Totnes and to review the eligibility of rural towns for such hubs so that we can keep our vital high streets alive?
Can I thank her for raising this, and she'll have heard the answer I gave just a few moments ago. What I will ensure is that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister so she can put the case in relation to the banking hub in question.
That completes questions. We'll let the front bench change over. Right, we now come to the urgent question. Dame Priti Patel.
Mr. Speaker, to ask the Secretary of State for FCDO if she'll make a statement on the actions taken to secure the elimination of Hamas from Gaza and the preservation of the ceasefire.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the House will be aware of events over the last 24 hours in Rafah, including reports that Israeli strikes took place last night. Estimates of the death toll vary, but suggest that up to 100 people in Gaza have been killed. We understand these strikes followed an attack yesterday afternoon, where responsibility remains unclear. As the Prime Minister said earlier, we echo the Americans in calling for urgent de-escalation and on all parties to keep the commitments they have made in the ceasefire agreement. We are clear that Hamas must release the bodies of all remaining Israeli hostages. The immediate priority is to ensure unrestricted flow of aid into Gaza. The Israeli government must urgently lift restrictions on aid entering, and international NGOs must be permitted to operate in Gaza to provide the scale of support that is needed. Civilians cannot wait. This government is working closely with our partners to do everything we can to support the transition from the ceasefire to phase 2 of the peace plan. This includes the disarmament of Hamas, the deployment of a ceasefire monitoring mission, an international security force, and the implementation of transitional governance arrangements in Gaza. We are clear there can be no role for Hamas in the future governance of the Strip. In recent days, the Foreign Secretary has spoken to the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordination, Tom Fletcher, the Egyptian Foreign Minister, and the Israeli Foreign Minister about the importance of opening more crossings and removing restrictions on aid. And as I told the House yesterday, Mr. Speaker, both she and I will be heading to the region shortly. On the 13th to 15th of October, I co-hosted with the Egyptian government and the Palestinian Authority the first conference to look at how we can leverage sustainable support to Gaza's reconstruction. Britain will continue to play our full part in support of the ceasefire and the wider peace initiative. There is not a moment to lose to get relief at scale to those in need and to make progress on the pathway to a lasting peace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The situation in Gaza is fragile, and we all want the ceasefire to hold and endure, and for it to transition into a sustainable end to the conflict. But that requires the terms of the ceasefire being adhered to. The scenes of mass Hamas gunmen carrying out summary executions is sickening. Their continued hoarding and disruption of aid to starved Gazans is shocking. Their refusal to disarm is disturbing. And their failure to return bodies of the deceased hostages is distressing. They and their families deserve dignity of a proper burial. Their loved ones have already been through terrible, terrible pain and suffering. No more coffins should be released with the wrong remains, and this is a disgusting game that has to end immediately. So can the Minister explain what pressure is being exerted on Hamas by the UK government so they comply with the full terms of the agreement and release all deceased hostages? Yesterday it was reported that Hamas gunmen killed an IDF soldier, violating the ceasefire, leading to the targeted IDF action in response. What is the Minister's assessment of the threat Hamas poses? And what practical steps is the UK taking to support the disarming and elimination of Hamas and the terrorist infrastructure in Gaza? Yesterday, the Secretary of State said and told the House the UK has been proposing different ways to help in the process of decommissioning and disarming Hamas, using expertise we've built up over many years. So can the Minister now say what is Britain's specific role, as this is a unique situation that we see regarding Hamas, with terrorist infrastructure and threats funded by Iran across the region? What action is the government taking to rebuild its relationship with Israel, given the important partnership that we have with Israel? And on aid, what steps are being taken to increase getting aid into Gaza? And given the remarks by the US Secretary of State about UNRWA and its role in Gaza, what discussions have taken place with the United States administration about UNRWA's future and the implication for the UK following the government's decision to give it millions of pounds despite knowing some of these risks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say at the outset that we track events in Gaza incredibly carefully. I do not intend to give the House a running commentary on each and each and every individual incident that takes place, the situation remains very volatile and very messy. I hope not to disappoint honourable members if I avoid giving very specific answers on very specific incidents. There are structures now being put in place, including the CMCC, the Civilian Military Coordination Centre, which is playing a role in seeking to verify the facts on the ground where we can. That work obviously takes some time. The UK is making a contribution to it, but I won't wish to get ahead of that process from the dispatch box. What I will say is we have been absolutely clear on the threat that Hamas pose to Palestinians, to Israelis, and to the wider world. That's why they're sanctioned as a terrorist organisation here. We are taking a range of measures with our partners to work through the very complicated but necessary steps, whether it's about transitional governments in Gaza, the security arrangements that need to follow, the international security force, and a whole range of other questions. I can assure the Shadow Foreign Secretary that we are deep in those discussions. We have been having them over the last few days, and we will have them in the region too. This is an incredibly complex piece of work, and we remain very focused on it. Mr. Speaker, just very quickly on aid, I would like to inform the House that there has been what appears to be quite a significant rate of aid going in particular through Kerem Shalom, which is very welcome, but the House will know of the centrality of the other crossings, particularly Rafah and the Allenby Bridge. They are not yet fully open. Aid cannot therefore flow in the volumes that we would wish to see them, and we continue to work with all our partners to try and see them reopened.
Mr. Speaker, welcome the statement from my honourable friend. But let's say to him, though, it's fairly clear that the Israeli government only agreed to the peace deal because they felt they had to, not because they necessarily wanted to. And after all this time, we still haven't got aid flowing through into Gaza in the way we'd all want to see. So what further action can the government take to put pressure on the Israeli government to make sure that all the aid that's needed actually gets in and gets in quickly?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a vital question from my honourable friend who follows these things closely. As I said in my last answer, to get to the volumes that we need, we are going to need both Rafah and the Allenby Bridge to be reopened. It is welcome that there does appear to be an increase of aid through Kerem Shalom, both UN aid and private trucks, and it is vital that the Palestinian private sector, particularly in Gaza, is able to get goods in, restart the market, and enable people to go about their normal lives. We will, as you would expect, continue to work with all of our partners until we see the reopening of those crossings.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The ceasefire was a rare moment of hope despite the challenges ahead, and so we share the dismay that extremists on both sides continue to look for opportunities to restart the war. We feel the distress of hostage families being tortured by Hamas cruelty and the grief of those whose family members, women and children, die under IDF bombs. The fake recovery of bodies by Hamas, as evidenced by the Red Cross, is a cruel and despicable act. Yet we can also see that extremists in the Netanyahu cabinet who have no interest in peace nor in the rights of Palestinian civilians are straining at the leash to retaliate. It is this cycle of violence and suffering that we must break. So I ask the Minister, what steps has the government taken to work with regional partners to force Hamas to find and return the remaining hostage bodies and to disarm? And given the importance of maintaining President Trump's interest and attention, what conversations has the Minister held with US counterparts to ensure that the White House does not lose focus on the prize of peace through a two-state solution?
I can reassure the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the British government remains in very regular contact at the highest levels with the American government on these questions, and the American government, as I think is clear in recent days, remains very focused on these issues, which is to be welcomed and to be supported, as the honourable member says. He raises important points about the recovery of bodies as well. I can confirm that I have been in talks with many of my opposite numbers across the region, most recently my Qatari opposite yesterday, as has the Foreign Secretary, and we continue to make these points with force.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And could I thank the Minister for his answering of the question. Could I say what a great job he does over time at updating our chamber. He's been terrific through this difficult period. Can I, though, ask him more about the type of aid that he thinks our country needs to send into Gaza to support the people there?
Madam, I thank my honourable friend for his kind words. There are two areas where aid is going to be particularly vital. Of course, the immediate needs that the Gazan people have and the humanitarian programme to meet those needs. Most recently, in Sharm el-Sheikh, the Prime Minister announced a £20 million contribution focused on water, sanitation and health. But there is also a need for the sustainable reconstruction of Gaza. The message we hear so often from Palestinians is that they wish their own companies and their own private sector to be engaged in that endeavour. They don't simply wish to see the World Bank or the United Nations leading the charge. They too want to take agency of those questions, and that was one of the reasons we involved them so closely in the conference I held in October.
Kit Malthouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Once again, it is the children of Gaza who seem to be bearing the brunt of the violence, with reportedly 35 of them liquidated overnight in casual dropping of bombs in retaliation. Equally as shocking is to realise that there will be absolutely no accountability for these deaths whatsoever. Unlikely to be any investigation into the targeting or the intelligence that was used. No sense of any impunity or punishment for what is very obviously a significant crime. Allied to that, it's proven to be quite a handy distraction to the very significant violence and brutality that's taking place in the West Bank on a daily basis. So can I ask the Minister, please, given that we've now recognised Palestine as a sovereign nation, will there be any further measures to deter Israeli aggression on Palestinian soil?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've spoken on a number of occasions in this House about events in the West Bank, and we have announced 3 waves of sanctions, including at the most senior levels against the Israeli government. I want to reassure the House that we remain very much focused on settler violence. We are moving into the olive harvesting period, which, as the honourable member will know, is a period in which violence is often particularly high, and regrettably we are seeing similar trends this year, and I'll have more to say about that later in the day. In relation to his first point about individual incidents, I refer to my previous comments. It is really important at such a delicate moment for the ceasefire that we are as precise as possible, and that's why the CMCC is engaged in the way that it is.
Anna Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The International Court of Justice has called on Israel to allow aid into Gaza, announced its occupation of the Palestinian territories as unlawful and demanded the removal of troops. Does the Minister understand that so as long as there are boots on the ground and that UK arms are still sold to Israel, that there will not be the peace that is needed for the Palestinians unless they're allowed to determine their fate and to be free from the violence that they continue to face?
Minister.
I think the honourable member refers to the ICJ advisory opinion in relation to the occupied Palestinian territory. There has also, as the House will be aware, been another advisory opinion from the ICJ more recently in relation to aid accessing Gaza. So, assuming it's in relation to the first of those, we have taken very significant decisions since that advisory opinion, not least the recognition of a Palestinian state. And I just want to clarify for the House once again that no British weaponry is used in either Gaza or the West Bank, apart from subject to those measures in relation to F-35s that we've previously discussed.
Thank you,
Madam Speaker. The Minister quite rightly said that Hamas must disarm, and there can be no place for Hamas in the future of Gaza. And yet, the White House appears to be licensing Hamas to conduct internal security operations. What conversation is he having with his US counterparts to reconcile the UK position, which he clearly outlined, and that of the US?
Minister.
As the honourable member knows, disarmament is usually a process. It takes time, it requires great complexity and very serious technical work. We want to ensure that Gaza is free of Hamas, that they are disarmed. That will take time, and that is the work that both us and the Americans are engaged in.
Noah Law.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Both in Gaza, where grassroots peace builders will face the immense task of reconciliation, and here at home, where debate has become dangerously polarised, the peace plan and a two-state solution remain the only credible path forward. And we must all be absolutely clear in condemning Hamas, who have no place in the future governance of a free Palestine, and the atrocities continuing to be committed by Prime Minister Netanyahu's far-right government. So two wrongs, put simply, Madam Deputy Speaker, do not make a right. And I would urge the Minister to make a statement calling for unity at this fractious time.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the question. There obviously have been innumerable wrongs in the region in recent months, and what is important is that we now continue the work, move forward with the ceasefire into phase 2 and see the wider peace plan fully implemented.
Leila Moran.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Throughout this horrific 2 years, I have kept trying to make the case for the innocents, for the people who did not choose any of this, who are not responsible. It is completely unacceptable that Hamas has not released all of the bodies. And it is equally unacceptable that the Israeli authorities released 100 Palestinian bodies with just numbers. What is this government doing to help the Palestinian authorities identify all the bodies in both Israel and Palestine who have been returned, so that those families can grieve and the dead can get the dignity that they deserve?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable member speaks with personal experience, real force, and obviously a very long track record on these issues. My heart goes out to families on both sides. Mortuary processes are difficult in the best of times, and one can only imagine the agonies that they are facing. We're not aware of specific requests to us for support on mortuary services, but if there are some, I'm very happy to consider them.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let us be clear. Peace cannot exist under impunity. Weeks into the ceasefire, Israel has once again bombed Gaza, killing over 100 Palestinians, including over 35 children, as it continues its genocide. More than a year and a half after the International Court of Justice's substantial ruling, which frankly and shamefully our government has still to reply to, which made it absolutely clear any government allowing trade with Israel's settlement economy is complicit in sustaining its continued illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories. British companies continue to trade in goods and financial services with those settlements, undermining our obligation under international law. So can the Minister tell us, when will the government suspend the UK-Israel trade deal and end all trade linked to the settlements, or will he continue to sit back and allow this complicity?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, since the ICJ advisory opinion that's been referred to, I wouldn't want the House to have the impression that the British government has done nothing. We have, at the centre of that advisory opinion, is the question of the status of the occupied Palestinian territory. We have been clear subsequently in recognising a state, what the status of that territory is. He raises important questions about the trade of goods with settlements. We do not accept trade with settlements on the same basis that we do trade with Israel. It is where British companies are doing so, they are in breach of the trading arrangements. HMRC will take an interest. They need to ensure that they know who they are trading with and in which territory. It is obviously difficult, as a whole range of nations and states have found, to ensure that if in settlements people wish to falsely label where the thing is produced, it is very difficult for others to then be able to determine. And I know he follows these issues very closely. He will no doubt be interested in the efforts of the Irish government in order to try and pass exactly the kind of legislation that he is describing and the very many difficulties that they have encountered in so doing. We are not in breach of our international obligations. If the honourable member would like to point me to some legislation which does what he says, which is in operation, I'd be grateful to see it. But I think this is one of those questions where we need to continue to work with our partners to ensure that the status of the occupied Palestinian territory, part of the Palestinian state, is understood by all.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On top of the absolute imperative of Hamas releasing
the remaining hostage bodies, on top of ensuring Hamas not only completely disarms but is removed from all governance in Gaza. Will the Minister agree with me that there also needs to be a widespread de-radicalization programme to undo the damage that has been done by innocent children in Gaza being taught in their textbooks, some of which were funded through UNRWA as an uncomfortable truth, to hate Israel and to hate Jews? That de-radicalization must happen also.
Minister.
There has been much work done in recent months, including under this government, in relation to the curriculum in Gaza. I'm aware of the concerns that have been raised about it. The funding to UNRWA that we have provided, which the Shadow Foreign Secretary referred to, included specific provision for ensuring that all of the reforms identified in the Colonna report, including in relation to curriculums, were followed through, and we continue to engage with UNRWA on those questions.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My colleagues have already asked about the current horror in Gaza, so I'm going to pivot to the longer term. Before this crisis, we saw decades of legal settlements on Palestinian territory. So I welcomed the government's sanctions on extremist settlers and Israeli ministers. But I don't want us to lose sight of this issue, Madam Deputy Speaker. So can I ask the Minister to consider what further steps he can take, including trade restrictions, to combat illegal settlements?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. There has been a significant increase in settlements and violence associated with those settlements. This is a continued problem, and we will continue to work at it alongside our partners to try and see this terrible trend reversed.
Stephen Flynn.
I get the impression that the Minister shares my despair at what feels like the constant impediments to real progress that are being put in place, both by the impunity of Hamas but also by the impunity of Benjamin Netanyahu's genocidal regime. But I am curious. The United States of America have indicated that the response from Israel last night was proportionate and they backed the action. Is that a view shared by His Majesty's government?
Minister.
For the reasons, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I said earlier, I'm reluctant to be drawn in a day-by-day commentary on the actions of both sides. What is key is that we keep the ceasefire going. That is what the Americans have been clear is still in place. This is going to be difficult. The events of the last 24 hours have been difficult. I am sure that we will have further difficult days ahead. This is not a straightforward path. I won't be drawn on an individual instance today if he doesn't.
Stella Creasy, after which I will call Steve Darling. Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. But further to my honourable friend's answer, it's now 19 days since October the 10th, and it's very clear there are still hostage families who cannot grieve for a loved one. There are still people starving in Gaza because there is not enough aid, and now we are seeing the West Bank deteriorate. Now, what we saw in the last 24 hours, the Vice President argued that skirmishes are somehow inevitable. With the greatest will in the world, the death of 35 children and possibly more is not a skirmish. If the international community can do anything, it is to be involved in the detail of ensuring that the ceasefire holds. So if he won't tell us what the government's response to it will he at least tell us what possible justification the Israelis have given for the latest incident?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't wish to spend too much time at the dispatch box repeating the statements of others. I'm sure the honourable member who follows this closely will have seen what the Israeli government provided as justification. I'm sure she will have seen the statements from Hamas denying that they were involved in the shooting in Rafah and the considerable uncertainty, I think, that has surrounded some of those events. The key question here for the British government is whether or not we think the ceasefire can hold, whether or not we think we can make the progress, all of the progress that she is describing on reopening the aid crossings, disarming Hamas, the transitional governance arrangements. I am not for 1 second taking away from the gravity of these incidents. Lives have been lost, children have been killed. But the role that stands before the British government at the moment is to ensure that we do not have a breakdown of the ceasefire. That does not mean we do not get into the detail. We have a Major General in the CMCC who is part of the efforts trying to ensure that when threats to the ceasefire, when violence occurs, we understand who and why, but I won't give running commentary from the dispatch box until we are in a position to do so.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has already acknowledged that it is the olive harvest season in the West Bank, a harvest that supports approximately 100,000 farming Palestinians. And yet we're seeing more than 150 attacks by settlers against these farmers. How is the government holding the Israeli government to account to stop these settlers acting with impunity?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've already said, clearly, as the honourable member rightly identifies, this is a period of particular danger. The increase in violence associated with settlements is something that we have condemned repeatedly, made sanctions against, and we will continue to make these points strongly, including this harvest season, as we did the last.
Samantha Niblett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All members of this House have been appalled by the scenes that emerged from Gaza in the wake of the ceasefire, showing Hamas executing people in the streets as they seek to reassert control over the area. So does the Minister agree with me that those scenes simply reinforce that Hamas are nothing but terrorists and murderers, and that they must have nothing to do with the future governance of Palestine?
So,
I do agree with my honourable friend. The scenes we have seen, which the Shadow Foreign Secretary referred to in her question, are chilling. Hamas are terrorists. They can have no role. The work to remove them and disarm them will not be easy, but it is vital and it is the necessary next step.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday it emerged that actually Hamas do know where the bodies of the remaining hostages are, as video evidence emerged of them playing games with one body, removing it from a building, burying it, then bringing along the International Red Cross and pretending that it had found it and dug it up. Does the Minister and the Government condemn this, and what more can the Government do with our international allies and the Gulf nations to put pressure and leverage on Hamas to return all of the remaining bodies immediately?
Minister.
The honourable member is right. Hamas must return all of the bodies immediately. We have made that point to our regional partners with force, and we will continue to do so.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The war crimes carried out by Israel last night, including the killing of 35 children, are a continuation of the horrors that we've seen over the last 2 years, visited upon the people of Palestine by a state led by a Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is currently wanted for war crimes. The government quite rightly brought wide-ranging sanctions on Russia for its unlawful invasion of Ukraine and its war crimes. But isn't the truth that unless there are real consequences to Netanyahu and Israel for these war crimes, they will carry on, because a lack of action, a lack of sanctions is giving them the green light and treating them with kid gloves? So isn't now the time for extensive, widespread sanctions on Israel? And why are they treated differently to Russia? And why is Netanyahu treated differently to Putin?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've discussed sanctions in this House many times, including the 3 waves under the time of my government, including against 2 ministers. Clearly, the priority now has to be to make the ceasefire work, to move into phase 2, to get through all of these incredibly important and incredibly complex questions, and that is the focus of this government.
Wendy Chamberlain.
You should be able to, because over the past decade there's been a stark absence of diplomatic efforts to address the core issues of the conflict and the continued advocacy for a two-state solution, and civil society organisations have played a vital role during this time entering that chasm. Will the Minister outline how is providing help to these organisations, and will it, for example, be through the recently announced International Fund for Israeli-Palestinian Peace?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for the questions. We remain focused on supporting a whole range of civil society. She will be aware of some of the proposals in the Knesset which we have opposed and which I referred to in my opening remarks. We will continue to conduct that work, and we'll have more to say about the fund she refers to in the coming days and weeks.
Dame Chianwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The ceasefire has been one of the few positive achievements in what has been an unending tale of misery, violence and horrific suffering. And all those involved in achieving that ceasefire deserve the gratitude and the recognition that has been received. But now, as Israel continues to kill Gazan children and Hamas refuses to disarm, could the Minister reassure us that everyone involved in achieving the ceasefire in the US, the UK and in the Middle East is equally concentrated and focused on keeping the peace and making the ceasefire work as the beginning of a peace process, and further, that given our recognition of the Palestine, that the Palestinian voice will be heard from?
I'd like to reassure the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I am absolutely certain that everyone in the UK working on this is focused on making sure the ceasefire sticks in the way that my honourable friend asks. And indeed, I can tell from our many contacts with the American system too that they remain similarly focused. They want this ceasefire to stick, and they are working to try and ensure that it does.
Colin Lockhart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister give assurances to this House that this government is utterly committed, along with our international allies, to eradicate Hamas's terrorist infrastructure and will not cease until they have been fully dismantled and obliterated and their remains of those hostages murdered in captivity have been returned?
Yeah.
I thank the honourable member for the question, and as I said to my colleague from Lincolnshire, we are committed to ensuring that those bodies return. We are committed to ensuring that Hamas are disarmed. The infrastructure of Hamas is not just, as has been the case in other conflicts, heavy weapons, small weapons. It is also clearly a network of tunnels under Gaza which have posed a very significant threat to Israel. That is a very difficult and complex engineering and military task, but it is one that needs to be included as part of this process.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly welcome the Minister's commitment to work to support Chevening scholars to leave Gaza and the decision particularly to extend the support to students with full scholarships. Can the Minister update the House on the latest steps the Government has taken to support Gazan students who wish to study in the UK, particularly those like the ones I'm aware of and that I've been arguing about, who have dependents who they understandably do not wish to leave in Gaza?
Madam Deputy Speaker, if you'll permit me, I might just say a little bit about the wider evacuation operations. They have continued, including on Monday and Tuesday of this week, when both students, as my honourable friend has been so doughty in pursuing, but also those children who are highly medically vulnerable and who can benefit from UK support. That work, indeed alongside my colleague from the Health Ministry, continues. We have been able to help many people get to the UK to transform their lives, to get the vital medical assistance and educational opportunities which I hope will provide for all of those people to make a real contribution to the future of Palestine. These have been incredibly complex operations, not least given the closures of getting people in and out of Gaza under the most recent period. We have, I'm afraid, very strict limits on how many dependents anyone can bring out. We have made updates to our policy in relation to those students who are fully funded, in which we can support a very small number of dependents to leave. I know many in the House with an interest have engaged with me directly on these questions. I would, I'm afraid, reiterate that these operations remain incredibly complex. I'm happy to talk to all members with an interest. There is neither infinite capacity in the UK to support, nor is there, even with our partners, unlimited capacity to get people out. So we have made an announcement, and I pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend and many others across this House on those questions, but I'd wish to keep people's expectations suitably focused on the very many constraints that remain on these operations.
Monica Harding.
Madam Deputy Speaker, renewed violence in Gaza continues against a backdrop of unimaginable human suffering. Millions remain in desperate need of food, water and medical supplies, yet aid convoys continue to face unacceptable obstacles. The UN reported yesterday that many of the 177 aid trucks that entered Karim Shalom were limited by congestion on coastal roads, in part because of the damage to that aid route. This means that they were forced to limit their supply of aid far below of what was agreed. And yet, aid routes are not fully open. Gazans cannot wait any longer. Aid restrictions should never have been there in the first place. So what specific pressure is the government exerting on Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli authorities to get the routes open fully and the aid in?
The honourable member asked important questions there. As I said earlier, it is welcome that there has been an increase in Kerem Shalom. That there is congestion too. It is the UN, the private sector and a number of donors who aren't using the UN who are all trying to get in aid through Kerem Shalom. So the congestion she describes is perhaps to be expected. What is vital is that the other routes reopen too. That's both the Allenby Bridge with Jordan and, of course, Rafah, which has been the subject of so much discussion already. We are working with our partners on these questions. We want to see progress soon. I would like to see it in days. This has proved to be more complex than I had hoped, and talks are ongoing.
Sarah Spey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to place on record my thanks for the tireless work of the Minister on the issues in the Middle East. But the devastation continues for Palestinian people living in Gaza, whether it's the murderous intent of Hamas or the 104 people who were killed under further strikes from Israel, including 46 children, as it's been reported overnight. Alongside this, Gaza's healthcare system has been decimated. So, and it's always women and girls, of course, who ended up as the worst victims in these circumstances. So could the Minister agree with me and update me about how further aid can be directed to support particularly women and girls and supporting the rebuild of the healthcare systems out there?
Minister.
These are vital questions from my honourable friend, who I know has remained very focused on these issues. Myself and the Health Minister, who's kindly joined me at the front bench, remain very focused on these issues. As access to Gaza becomes easier, as we all hope that it does, clearly amongst the most urgent questions are ensuring medical supplies, medical personnel and indeed medical infrastructure is in place to meet the very significant needs of the Gazan people, and we'll continue to work closely on that.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For every day since the ceasefire took place, at least 20 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed by the IDF. There's been numerous other breaches of the ceasefire and continued military activity in the West Bank. Could the Minister assure the House that Britain no longer flies RAF planes over Gaza, no longer cooperates with Israel on its security arrangements, and no longer supplies any weapons to Israel because of their frequent breaches of the ceasefire and their continued abuse of the people of Gaza and of the West Bank?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out our arrangements in relation to arms and the very significant suspensions that we made from this dispatch box a number of times. They remain in place. The honourable member, the right honourable member, forgive me, asks about flights of the RAF. I think he refers to the RAF flights that were attempting to find hostages in Gaza. They have stopped. The hostages have been released. There's no further function for those flights, so they have ended.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One crucial factor in achieving the current ceasefire was the unprecedented declaration at the end of July by all 22 members of the Arab League, calling on Hamas to release the hostages, lay down its arms and give up power in Gaza. That was hugely important in showing Hamas that they had run out of road. So can I ask the Minister what role the UK and our partners had in implementing that declaration? And does he agree that our strong diplomatic relations led by our excellent diplomats do have a positive impact?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I associate myself very much with the comments of my honourable friend who knows the neck of the woods well. Our diplomats are excellent. I was very pleased in July to be in New York when the declaration he describes was made. It was obviously part of a declaration which included our own commitments in relation to a Palestinian state, commitments which led to our recognition in September.
Chris Coughlin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all hope desperately for a just peace in Gaza. I served alongside the Minister as diplomat on the Middle East and as a soldier. Given that, I particularly welcome the proposed international security force, but it is essential in my view that such a force includes troops from Arab countries, possibly Western countries too, to reassure the Israelis, and crucially is therefore long-term and ready to take casualties. So can the Minister update the House on what progress, composition and the mandate of the potential force would be?
Minister.
My gallant friend, I think, I'm sure Madam Deputy Speaker will correct me if I've got that wrong, is right to focus on some of these very practical questions. He, like I, served in countries where peacekeeping forces were unable to keep the peace and were unwilling to take casualties and unable, therefore, to fulfil their mandate. These are all some of the most central and most delicate questions around the ISF. I hope he'll forgive me if I won't give him a detailed commentary at this time, but I expect to return to this House to provide more detail when I'm able.
Baran Moon.
Deputy Speaker, there have been recent reports, press reports, that the Israeli government has been arming factions within Gaza in order to destabilise Hamas. Can the Minister comment on any of these reports, and what is the British government's position on this?
Minister.
As I said earlier, Madam Speaker, I won't provide extensive commentary on reports, but clearly safety and security for Gazans is going to involve Palestinian authorities able to ensure law and order. Those who have been living in Gaza have suffered terribly. There has been widespread looting, widespread violence. Who those factions and criminals are and who is supporting them will, I'm sure, be a question over which many will pore. The key thing now is that security needs to return to Gaza, that security cannot be provided by the masked Hamas gunmen that the Shadow Foreign Secretary rightly referred to at the outset, and so that work continues.
Ben Lake.
The Minister has rightly emphasised the importance of securing swift and urgent supply of aid to all those in need in Gaza, but has also mentioned that some of the crossings remain disrupted or indeed fully closed. Can I ask him what reasons have been given for the continued delay in reopening all of the crossings? Okay.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there has been, I think, some public reporting of the Israeli concerns about the Allenby Bridge, particularly after violence there. Rafah has been a subject which we've discussed many times in this House. It remains an absolutely critical artery. It is true to say in both the Allenby crossing and Rafah, there will need to be agreement between both countries. I hope that that agreement can be secured quickly. I hope that Israel remove the restrictions that are in place and that we do see the free flow of aid through those crossings very shortly.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement and for his focus on maintaining the ceasefire. I stand in solidarity with the many ordinary Palestinians living under Hamas, and also with the families in Israel waiting for their loved ones to be returned. But I cannot conclude that what Netanyahu did in the last 24 hours is proportionate in any way. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do continue to hope and pray for peace, and with peace will come the opportunity to rebuild Gaza. But I can't see how that can be done when Israel holds so many people without charge, so many people, particularly healthcare workers. And my constituent Iman is really concerned about Dr. Hussam Abu Safia and him being held. So does he agree it's really important that people should not be held without charge, particularly the healthcare workers? And is he having negotiations with Israel on their release?
Minister.
Due process is incredibly important. I've raised this case, this specific case, with the Israeli authorities, and it is important that where people are detained, particularly where doctors are detained who are providing vital life-saving work, that adequate explanations are provided. We will continue to take this matter up with the Israelis.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Overnight, more than 100 Palestinian civilians were killed by Israeli airstrikes. Once again, innocent civilians are suffering a collective punishment, this time imposed for breaches of the ceasefire by Hamas. Unless this government believes that all Palestinian civilians are Hamas and therefore are legitimate targets, he must unequivocally condemn these attacks on innocent civilians. So will he unequivocally condemn these attacks, and will he call them what they are? an egregious breach of international humanitarian law.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I've covered these questions already in the session, but let me be absolutely clear. All Palestinians are very clearly not part of Hamas. That so many Palestinians want to see an alternative. They want to see this process succeed. They want to see the ceasefire hold. That is where our focus is.
Richard Fard.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Israeli Defence Forces said this morning that they had, quote, renewed enforcement of the ceasefire. The strikes are reported to have killed 20 women and 46 children following the death of one IDF soldier. President Trump's peace plan makes provision for Arab states to commit stabilization forces. And I appreciate the Minister's point that he cannot provide a running commentary on such a stabilization force, but does he share my view that after a ceasefire, the protagonists are the least well-placed to enforce peace?
Madam Deputy, I'm not sure I totally followed. The composition of the ISF is not yet determined. As I said to his colleague, we will no doubt discuss this further in the House once we're in a position to provide a fuller update. There have been a number of states that have indicated some willingness to provide troops to the ISF. I want to just clarify for the House that we have provided military personnel into the region, but that is into the CMCC, the Civil Military Coordination Centre, which has a different tasking than the ISF. These are all complex questions, very much in negotiation at the moment, and when some of those matters are more clear and more finalised, then I'm happy to return to the House.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is horrifying that Netanyahu has bombed Gaza in this clear violation of the ceasefire. The suffering in Gaza is unimaginable, and to move forward, we must demand justice and reparations for all victims of atrocity crimes and hold to account the perpetrators. So what is the government doing to uphold UK obligations under international law to bring to justice those responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide? And also, what is the government doing to push for journalists to be allowed in, given the Israeli government's outrageous restrictions preventing them from documenting the horrors?
Minister.
International justice and accountability is of vital importance, Madam Deputy Speaker. That is why this government removed the block on the ICC. It's why we continue to support that very important body, why we continue to support the ICJ. They are the competent courts. They are the process by which justice will be secured, and we continue to support them in those endeavours.
Jim Allister.
Are we expected to believe that in the months and years ahead, the government will stand by its promise that Hamas must be fully disarmed and play no part in the government in Palestine? I ask because a previous Labour government under Tony Blair, with the present National Security Advisor by his side, promised the people of Northern Ireland that the IRA and other terrorists would be totally disarmed through decommissioning. It didn't happen. Supposedly decommissioned weapons continued to be able to be used to kill, and we ended up with the surrogates of the IRA in government. Will it be any different in Gaza?
Minister.
One thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have learnt so far as a politician is not to make comparisons between the Middle East and practically anywhere else, and certainly not the Northern Ireland. So I'll allow the Northern Ireland Secretary of State to answer his particular questions about the current arrangements. Clearly, peace is possible. We've demonstrated it here, we've demonstrated it in many other places. That has to be the work of the government, and that's what we're focused on.
Shakat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like previous announcements on ceasefire, it appears this one is going in the same vein. Primarily, one side, the Palestinians seize, whilst the other, Israelis, continue to fire. 20 Palestinians have been killed every single day since this so-called last ceasefire. Last night being the most violent, with over 104 Palestinians killed, including a targeting of a cancer patient camp. We all appreciate the Minister coming in week out to answer these questions. I certainly do. But given the UK has not stopped arming Israel since the genocide began, can he confirm how many export licenses to Israel have been granted in Labour's time in office?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope the honourable member will forgive me that I don't have the numbers precisely to hand. I did do an extensive hearing in front of the Select Committee where we went through the numbers in some detail. But let me just focus on the key point. We have suspended all arms that could be used in this way. We are not selling bombs or bullets that could be used in Gaza, could be used in the West Bank. So the munitions that he and so many others in this country saw on their television screens exploding last night were not British.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers, for his tone and indeed for his well-chosen words. We do appreciate that. The moment reports of shots fired at Israeli soldiers in Rafah were reported, IDF soldier murdered, my heart sank, as indeed many others probably did as well, because I knew that 10 years peace had been broken by Hamas. So does the Minister accept that the retaliation is inevitable? And what role can government play along with our allies to rebuild the fragile peace process, disarm Hamas, remove their weapons, destroy them, and then real peace, lasting peace, can actually happen?
Minister.
Madam Deputy, I thank the Honourable Member for his important question and, as ever, courteous tone. The work is important. The threats to the ceasefire are many and varied. We will continue to work with our partners in exactly the way he describes.
And that concludes the urgent question. I'll just give the front benches a few moments to change over. Urgent question, Angus MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for allowing me to put forward this urgent question. To ask the Secretary of State for the Home Office if he will make a statement on the planned use of MAD barracks to house asylum seekers. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The use of hotels to house asylum seekers is a disgrace. As members on all sides will know, it's a practice that became widespread long before this government entered office, and it is one of the clearest indicators of the shambles that we inherited last summer. People across the country are frustrated, if not furious, and we wholeheartedly agree. And that is why, since the general election, we've been working to address the chronic issues that have been allowed to build up in the asylum system over several years. At peak under the previous government, there were 400 hotels in use. Now this number is around 200, and this reduction has been achieved despite what the Home Affairs Select Committee has called a dramatic increase in demand. Under this government, decisions on asylum applications are up, as are asylum-related returns. Meanwhile, system costs are down. However, as my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has made clear, we must go further and faster. That means moving at pace to fulfil the government's commitment to close every asylum hotel. Work to facilitate this exit is ongoing, and the Asylum Accommodation Task Force is working across government to deliver alternative asylum accommodation. And I can confirm to the House that plans are underway regarding the temporary use of Ministry of Defence sites at Cameron Barracks Inverness and Crowborough Training Ground, East Sussex, for the purpose of asylum accommodation. Under these plans, a total of around 900 people will be housed across both sites. These two sites are among a number of options being looked at as we seek to alleviate the pressure on the system and to drive down hotel use. And while this is a complex and fast-moving operating environment, there is a strong understanding within the Home Office about the importance of local engagement. My officials have been engaging directly and regularly in advance of this with the Scottish Government, with the relevant councils and with local service providers, and will continue to do so. Whatever decisions are made regarding specific locations, we are clear that the impact on communities must be minimised. The safety and security of people living and working in the surrounding areas is paramount. Madam Deputy Speaker, a crisis of the scale we were left with was always going to take time to correct, but we know the British people are impatient for change, as are we, and this government will do whatever it takes to end hotel use, fix the broken asylum system and secure our borders.
Angus MacDonald.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister, for the... I got a call yesterday at 7:10 in the morning from the BBC, and they said, what is your comment on the Cameron Barracks being taken over to use house migrants? Now, I know that place well because I was based there in the army. It is residential. It is surrounded by housing, very, very close. And what's more, it's only 10 minutes from the Inverness city centre. I asked for a briefing from the Home Office and got one, which was wonderful. What I learned is there's going to be up to 309 males there. There are single asylum seekers, and they'll move in at the end of November. I have a few questions from that. Why was I not engaged in any sort of discussion about this? Why was the Scottish Government not engaged in conversation? And why were the Highland Council and other authorities just informed? They were not engaged, which was the word you used. The second question I have is, did the Home Office officials actually consider the fact it was a city centre before they agreed to take it on? Why is it okay to close town centre migrant hotels in the south of England, yet plan to house 300 migrant men in army quarters in Inverness city centre? It's effectively the same thing. And would the Minister meet me to discuss the Home Office halting the plan to utilise Cameron Barracks to house migrants? Thank you.
I'm grateful for that question. I recognise the anger that the honourable gentleman conveys there. I am sorry that he heard in the way that he did. I, of course, will have that meeting with him. It can be difficult to sequence this correctly. We live, as all colleagues know, in an age of mis and disinformation, and trying to sequence who hears what and when is or can be sticky. But nevertheless, he should not have heard in the way that he did. And similarly, I would recognise, because of course she can't take part in these proceedings, the Right Honourable Member for Sussex Weald, whose duties as Deputy Speaker preclude her, but also the same is true for her. And I would recognise the strength of feeling that she has conveyed to me in no uncertain terms about her views and the views of her constituents and their opposition. And I will continue to engage with him, I will continue to engage with her, and I would encourage her local authority to also do so. I recognise the strength of feeling. On his other questions, of course that consideration has been made. We're looking at all sites in that regard, be they a hotel, be they dispersed accommodation. Always the local context is considered. I would gently say that, of course, both sites have been used recently for the Afghan resettlement scheme. So there is a clear understanding across government of the capabilities of those sites and, of course, their locations as well. But I want to be very clear at what's at stake here, because the honourable gentleman talks about closures of hotels. Now, we know that hotels are an exceptionally challenging issue in this country. Too many people come to this country being sold a dream that they will be housed in a hotel and they'll be able to work illegally in our economy. Today, we have announced that we've had our best ever year for illegal work raids, with 1,000 people deported as a result. But we have to break the model that says you'll get to live in a hotel and work illegally, and this is a really important part of that.
Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Since this government came to office, the illegal immigration crisis has gotten seriously worse on every front. The number of people arriving in the country illegally is up. Not just a little bit. Arrivals are up more than 50% when compared to the same period before the election. Before the election, the number of migrants staying in hotels had fallen by 47%. It's now gone up. And less of those people breaking into this country illegally by small boat are now being removed. We're now in a position where the government is putting forward a proposal which, when in opposition, they described as an admission of failure. A Defence Minister is unable to say whether the plan will save us money or cost us more. Also, we hear this proposal will involve accommodation on a site directly next to the homes provided to families of our brave armed forces personnel. Have they consulted these families on this plan? It demonstrates that we need much stronger proposals than the weak efforts the government are presiding over. That's why we've put forward the Borders Plan, which goes beyond tinkering with the system. If we want to stop the use of this accommodation, we need to completely change how we approach this problem and ensure that all illegal immigrants are removed within a week. This is a comprehensive plan based on our proposal to leave the ECHR, reform how our asylum system operates, and remove the blockages which have stopped the removal of illegal entrants. This is a proposal which is not only practical, but fair, as those who come to the UK illegally should not be housed at the taxpayers' expense in ever greater numbers. People need to know that if they break into this country, they will be detained and they will be deported. That is how we solve this crisis. Therefore, I finish by asking the question we're all wondering. When will the asylum hotels close? Will the government commit to closing all asylum hotels within a year?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What an optimistic effort by the honourable gentleman, who invites us to believe that a system that he and his colleagues broke over a period of 14 years, they have worked out how to fix in 14 months. I think the British public saw through that last July, July 2024. I suspect they will see through it again. He talks about removals. Of course, removals are up now over 35,000 since we took office. But of course, when it comes down to to why we have hotels in the first place, where is the original sin? Of course, the original sin is that colleagues opposite stopped assessing claims. That's why we have hotels. That's why we've made the efforts we have to shift that backlog. The reality is, it's a broken system. We have a very simple equation. It's a complicated issue with a simple equation. We are a very popular country for people to want to come to. Of course we are the greatest country in the world with our brilliant institutions. But it's also because people are sold a dream that you can come here, live in a hotel and work illegally. Until and unless you attack those two fundamental truths, nothing will change. But we know, Madam Deputy Speaker, we know that the party opposite do not oppose our plans today, because after all, they did 2 military sites of their own.
Chris Murray.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Affairs Committee this week released a report into asylum accommodation, and it is utterly damning. In 2019, the Conservative government bound the country into asylum contracts that have been disastrous for local communities, disastrous for asylum seekers themselves, and disastrous for the taxpayer, but they have been brilliant for private providers who have made tens of millions of pounds of profits. Now, it's right that the government is looking at alternative ways to house asylum seekers that will be better for communities, local asylum seekers and the taxpayer. And Scotland is a welcoming, tolerant country. We are willing to play our part. But will the Minister give us assurances that he will learn from the mistakes of the previous government, work with local communities, work with local authorities, work with devolved administrations, and make sure this works to solve the problems we have seen in the past?
Minister.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. Of course, I've studied that report closely. Similarly, there have been over 1,000 lessons learned from the previous government's attempts to do this, which we're taking in hand to make sure we do it right. He talks about the cost. You know, I am very pleased that in our time in office we have reduced the cost to the taxpayer of the asylum system by £1 billion, including 500 million across the hotel estate. But it's clear, it was clear from his and his colleagues' reports, that we have to go further. That is what we're doing. We are, of course, within the parameters of the contracts that we inherited, sweating those. Where there's money to be recouped, we will recoup them for the taxpayer. But it will come back to a fundamental question. If we want to spend less money on this type of activity, we have to have fewer people in the estate itself. And that starts with breaking the attraction that they have to come to this country.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We share the Minister's concern about the approach of the official opposition. Clearly, they left us with this mess and now they feign outrage. Madam Deputy Speaker, it appears this government's proposal, however, is to decant asylum seekers from one kind of unsuitable and costly accommodation, sadly, to another. Instead, it should be tackling the real issue, speeding up asylum decisions so those with no right to stay are returned and those with a valid claim can work, pay tax and integrate. I will pick up the Minister's point about the difficulty of sequencing communications. As a Member of Parliament who's had an asylum hotel opened in his constituency, I was informed several weeks in advance. I actually offered a much better form of accommodation, alternative, somewhere else nearby. I found out that the Home Office was determined to open a hotel because that alternative was not taken up. It would have been more appropriate, and my constituency feels let down. Now, the government has promised to end the use of hotels by 2029, yet has put forward no credible plan to achieve it. The Lib Dems have set out a plan for ending hotel use in just 6 months by declaring a national emergency and setting up Nightingale processing centres to bring down the backlog. So will the Home Secretary match the Lib Dem plan by declaring that national emergency today? And will the Minister confirm whether the plan that he's put forward means speeding up decisions and returning those with no right to stay, or does it mean simply shifting large numbers of asylum seekers from one form of accommodation to another? Will the Minister share what assessment has been made of the relative merits of army barracks in or next to urban areas as opposed to those in rural areas? And finally, will the Minister concede that cutting overseas development spending will drive more people away from conflict zones to seek safety in Europe and onward onto boats unsafely in the English Channel?
Minister.
I recognise the spirit with which the honourable gentleman and his colleagues speak, and I share, and indeed I think we can demonstrate through our actions, our zeal with regards to speeding up decisions. That's why we've made such a significant increase into decision makings. Similarly, I think it is a matter of record that our commitment to speeding up removals, that's why we've seen so many people with no right to stay, well over 35,000 now, removed since we took office. What I gently say to him is that in doing that, you still have a situation where there is a significant cohort of people, as we deal with the backlog left by colleagues opposite, that need to be housed and accommodated while their claims are processed. Similarly, there is an attraction. We see that, of course, in the numbers who seek to cross the channel to come here. And until and unless you address that element, that alone, the suggestions from the honourable gentleman alone will not make that deterrent. What we offer today is a significant and real deterrent to break that pull factor. And on the point on overseas development, of course, the honourable gentleman will know the commitment made by the Prime Minister. We want to return that to 0.7% as soon as we can, because it makes a huge impact across the world, and we want to continue to do that.
Dame Chianwara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have visited the hotel in Newcastle where up to 400 asylum seekers are living. I have listened to local community concerns. I've spoken to the asylum seekers. I have spoken to the hotel owners, the programme managers, the police and local stakeholders. And it is absolutely clear that the policy of housing asylum seekers in hotel accommodation instituted by the last government is absolutely failing everybody concerned, except for possibly the private providers profiting from the contracts. Newcastle City Council is in discussions with the Home Office about alternative models for accommodation which better meet the needs of the city and also of asylum seekers. Could the Minister tell us how those discussions are going and when we can expect to see progress?
Minister.
I'm grateful for that question. My honourable friend will know that in the spending review, £500 million was set aside for working with local government to identify those exact sites that she's talking about, to bring them forward for use. In the spirit of what the honourable member for Cheltenham said, and in fact in the spirit of what all of the colleagues have said in terms of early engagement, they may well be better ways to build public confidence in terms of what's being provided and that they are in the right locations with the right support. So those conversations with the City of Newcastle are ongoing, and we will be working very hard to try to bring them to a satisfactory conclusion.
Kieran Mullen.
Thank you. And can I begin by making crystal clear that the member for Sussex Weald, Madam Deputy Speaker, is doing everything she possibly can to object to proposals to house illegal migrants at the Crowborough training camp in her constituency and just over the border for mine. This site is not suitable. It was previously considered by the Home Office and rejected, but it seems we now have a council that's willing to roll over for the purposes of ideological reasons to the suggestion that it's used in the end. Councils can object to these proposals. So can I ask the Minister what objections the Green and Liberal Democrat-led Wealdon Council made to these proposals for making use of the Crowborough training camp for housing hundreds of asylum seekers?
Minister.
I'm grateful for that question. As I've set out, we've had significant discussions with local authorities. They of course challenge our assumptions, they challenge both scale, they challenge location, as always is the case, but nevertheless, what I would gently say to the honourable gentleman is that to say no to this, as he says it's not the right location, he should be clear about what he's saying yes to. Is he saying yes to continued use of hotels, or is he simply saying somewhere else? But I know those conversations will keep going, and I would encourage the local authorities to engage with their local members.
Nick Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Tackling this issue is something I hear on the doorsteps often. So can the Minister please set out more on what the government is doing to stop small boat arrivals in the first place, so we can close more hotels more quickly?
Minister.
This is, of course, the crucial part of the equation. Over the last year, we've made significant inroads in our efforts to disrupt organised crime, the people who prey on this model. We've done 350 disruptions, an increase of 40% on what we inherited. These are embedded gangs. They've had a 6-year head start on this government thanks to colleagues opposite, but that work is absolutely vital. But underpinning that and underpinning their business model is the attraction of this country. And when it comes to hotels, when it comes to illegal working, those are the things we have to remove in order to make sure we're not so attractive.
Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My colleague on the Home Affairs Select Committee made an excellent point. The asylum accommodation contracts signed under the previous Tory government gifted scandalously high profits to the private providers. Frankly, it's a PPE-type scandal. Clearspring's profits soared from £6,000 per employee in 2020 to £300,000 per employee in 2024, with its owner Graham King entering the Sunday Times rich list. Given the vast sums still being wasted on asylum hotel accommodation under those same flawed arrangements, despite this government having been in power for 16 months and with the numbers housed in hotels increasing by 8% over the last year, can the Minister please explain how any new asylum accommodation will be provided in a cost-effective manner that does not allow private companies to make further obscene profits on the backs of the UK's hard-working people?
Minister.
I'm grateful for that question. We do have to work within the parameters of the contracts that we inherited from colleagues opposite, but I can give him the assurance that we've reduced that bill by £1 billion, including £500 million from hotels, but we're looking further about the profit-sharing elements of those contracts and are recouping money for the taxpayer to make sure we get the best deal possible.
Tarkiel Crichton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response. And as he pointed out, and as Sean Fraser, the Labour candidate for Inverness, stated yesterday, this situation has arisen because of the broken asylum system the Labour government inherited from the Conservatives. But it has to be handled sensitively, and while I sympathise with my friend, the Honourable Member for Inverness, Skye and West Rothschild, for how he heard this news, I must caution him against leaning into language about army patrols, security fences and the security of young women. This has to be handled sensitively. It falls on us all to set a recent tone when making recent concerns. And can I ask the Minister how he will deal with the situation locally and what talks he will have with Highland Council and other councils when it comes to dealing with this proposal?
I'm grateful for that. This is a really important point about the effectiveness of these sites. And we've engaged with, whether it's the local authority, whether it's the health services, whether it's police services, whether it's fire, to make sure that the impact of this site treads as lightly as possible on the local community. The experience from Napier Barracks, the experience from RAF Wethersfield, is if when done thoughtfully, this can be done well, and that is our commitment.
Wendy Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents are increasingly concerned about the rising number of HMOs. So can the Minister assure me that any overflow from these bases will not lead to an increased reliance on HMOs in our towns and cities, including Walsall? And what more powers will this government give to councils to protect the private rented sector from being squeezed out as a result of this?
Minister.
Well, the Honourable Lady alights on a really important point, because there is, of course, an option open to government that if you want to close the hotels, you simply pull a lever of houses of multiple occupation and change the character of communities across the country. And we're not doing it. We're very clearly not doing that. And we want to find that balance right. Dispersed accommodation is a really important tool that local authorities have for people fleeing violence, people with substance abuse, in this case for people who are seeking refuge. But as I say, it's to find that balance, and that is the choice. Colleagues don't want to, colleagues want the hotels closed, colleagues opposite do. Colleagues opposite apparently don't want to use military barracks, having done so themselves. They also don't want us to use houses in multiple occupation. The reality is that's an unserious approach to what's a really serious problem.
Jessica Turl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The party opposite left our asylum system in an absolute mess. And frankly, now they claim to care about consultation and community impact. Where was that when my community got 2 hotels more than 10 years ago? Now, this government, by contrast, is bringing the number of hotels down, increasing the number of people with no right to be in the country who were returned, which shows that we take this issue very seriously. So can the Minister please tell my constituents in Bournemouth West what more this government is doing to close every single asylum hotel?
Minister.
Well, I can give that clear message to her constituents from this dispatch box. We will close every single hotel, just as we committed at the general election. I'll also give the commitment, because she raises an important point, and I acknowledge the shortcomings in this exercise that the Honourable Gentleman has raised and that the Deputy Speaker has raised as well. We do want to reset the Home Office's relationship with local government, with local authorities. That's why we've had those conversations too. But we need to make sure that local decision makers and local leaders are wired into these decisions earlier so that we can collectively make sure they're a success.
Graham Ledbetter.
Deputy Speaker. My colleague and Scottish Government Social Justice Secretary Shirley Somerville wrote to the Secretary of State on the 26th of September about this issue, seeking an urgent meeting with Highland Council and COSLA. No reply to that letter was received, and the first that she was aware of the decision was when she heard it on the radio, as many of the rest of us did. The asylum seekers, by their very nature, are fleeing conflict, they're fleeing persecution, they require wraparound support in many cases, they will have suffered significant mental trauma in many cases, some of them physical trauma. If there is not a support package in place, then things are not going to go well. And 300 people in Inverness puts a huge strain on those local services in such a short space of time. What is the Minister doing to address those issues with the Scottish Government and with Highland Council?
Minister.
This point on wraparound support is a very important one as well. The point of these sites in these ways is that you have that ability to provide those, whether it's local amenities or whether it's to provide vital services to that cohort without having to rely on the local health services. So, that's why we're having those conversations with health authorities, with police, with fire, with the local council, to make sure that that support is in place so that, as I say, the impact is as light as possible on the community that is there already.
Ewan Steinbank.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the urgency ministers are showing to end Tory-created asylum hotel use, which does not work for those fleeing persecution or local communities such as Falkirk, also bringing down the cost of the asylum system and increasing processing rapidly. Can I ask the Minister to elaborate on which criteria the Department will be applying in deciding the sequence of asylum hotel closures, and how will this be applied fairly and equitably across all of the nations and regions of the United Kingdom?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman tempts me, as he has tempted me on multiple occasions, because I know of his vigour in closing hotels across his community, to perhaps give them a sequence. I would say that we intend, as I say, we're going to close every single one of them, and none of them will be open a day longer than they have to be. He will have to bear with us a little bit more in terms of the sequencing of that, but we'll be very clear on the decisions we take when we take them.
Mims Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, what a bolt from the blue. There is now huge local concern across my Wealdon district since this news broke of a plan in Sussex from boats to barracks. The council leadership urgently needs to speak to local MPs and many other councillors to assuage deep concerns about hundreds of asylum seekers now coming to a very rural area part of Sussex. Does this simply mean, Minister, that the Cockthorne Hotel people living there will move to the barracks? And can the Minister kindly try and work with Wealdon District Council leadership to hold public meetings locally to properly address the significant issues and discussions that have been had? What's going on around the planning process and the community and police support? Many people need to understand this with the unexpected choice of such a countryside location. Thank you.
Minister.
The honourable member raises a number of very important questions. We, of course, want to work with the local authorities to make sure the public get the information, the reassurance that they need. There's always, as I say, a lot of mis and disinformation. I can make that commitment to her. She has heard what I've said about the timeliness of engagement with colleagues, and I reiterate my sadness on that, and we will do better with her and her colleagues to get them the answers they need to be the leaders in the community that they are. And as I want to reiterate to her and to her community, we intend for this to have the lightest impact on them possible. It's been proven to be done at Wethersfield, proven to be done at Napier, and I've no doubt we can do it again.
Samantha Niblett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. From 800 boat crossings in 2018, before we left the EU, to 40,000 a year now because of Brexit, I wonder whether the Minister can give some clarity as to the measures he's taking to help solve this immigration crisis at its core without falling back to yet another fake silver bullet, which is some of the parties opposite are suggesting, to leave the ECHR, which would not only get rid of the rights of asylum seekers, but also that of my constituents in South Derbyshire.
Well, my honourable friend identifies that this is really a global challenge. This is something we're seeing. it's like being at a party you weren't invited to at the moment, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend lights on an important point with regards to the global nature of this challenge. She will know, as colleagues will know, of our work that we're doing with France as most immediate neighbours and the importance of scaling up our returns pilot. She'll also know our engagement on the continent with regards to organised crime. These are highly sophisticated global networks and require that global response to break them.
Dr Andrew Murison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, would the Minister ensure in future that right honourable and honourable members are given some notice of the government's plans in relation to MOD accommodation, and ensure that the gross discourtesy that has been visited on the honourable member in this particular case is not repeated, and communities may even be able to suggest to ministers, to government, alternatives where alternatives exist? And with respect to the pull factors that he rightly alluded to, will he ensure that accommodation that is offered up by the MOD is at the more austere end of the spectrum? Because it is certainly the case that men and women of our armed forces, families and veterans, are heartily fed up with seeing people not being put in accommodation, which apparently is not fit, but apparently was fit to house soldiers, sailors and airmen.
Minister.
Yeah, I'm grateful for those questions. You know, these are austere accommodations. That's the whole point, is to change that narrative that is sold on social media to people, that you get to come here, work, live in a hotel and get to work illegally. The accommodation will be functional, it will be humane, but it will be basic, it will be functional. I can give him that assurance because that's exceptionally important. On his point on engagement with colleagues, I hope he would know from the short time that I shadowed him in opposition that I would never knowingly provide discourtesy to colleagues. I value colleagues across this place of all parties and none, but I've reflected a lot on, you know, exactly as he says, as what's happened in this case. And yes, it will be better, I think, certainly with regards to colleagues. I need to do more and more directly, and I've taken that on board as part of those reflections.
Galadenia.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Refugee Council has a clear proposal that would allow the Minister to close asylum hotels within a year without resorting to barracks. A one-off scheme to give a time-limited permission to stay, subject to rigorous security checks, to people from countries that mean that they are almost certain to be recognised as refugees if it were not for the backlog. So will the Minister adopt this sensible solution and also provide safe and legal routes so that people aren't pushed into the hands of people smugglers in the first place?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady mentions an important proposal, and it is a reasonable thing to say. We're talking about capacity in the system. One way to resolve that is, of course, let significant numbers through that system without their claims being processed in the normal way. I can't support that. As she's heard me say on a number of occasions, at the root of this is not just the strong day-to-day administrative running of the system. The reality is we've managed to really improve the performance of it and reduce cost. But that alone won't stop what is happening, which is that really, really significant pull factor to this country. And I believe that doing what she suggests there would merely turbocharge that, and I can't support that.
Nick Timothy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister's given us the usual government lines on returns under this government, when the majority of them are obviously voluntary returns, and actually when it comes to enforced returns, the numbers are lower than 9 of the 14 years of Conservative government and 15% lower than the Tory average. I want to raise the case of Hadush Kebatu. The Home Secretary said she'd, quote, pulled every lever to deport him, but when it emerged he was paid £500 after threatening to disrupt his departure, we were told that it was actually an operational decision to do that. So can the Minister confirm Kebatu withdrew his asylum claim and forfeited appeal rights, and admit that we won't be able to deport foreign nationals in foreign criminals in sufficient numbers unless we cut off the endless routes for human rights claims and legal appeals?
Minister.
Well, I can say to the honourable gentleman that numbers are up. It's more than 10% in terms of returns under this government. I think the British public care about that, and I make no apologies for doing that in the quickest, cheapest and most expeditious way, as in many cases is what we pursue. He makes a very important point about Hadush Kebatu, a convicted sex offender who had no place on our streets, no place in our country. It is right that he has been removed. He was forcibly deported. A team of 5 escorts accompanied him on that flight. We turned down an application for the facilitated return scheme, which under successive governments has offered grants of up to £1,500. But given the threats and the very real threats to disrupt the flight, an operational decision was taken to provide a £500 payment. This was taken because the alternative was slower, more expensive for the taxpayer, and would have included detention, a new flight, and no doubt subsequent legal claims. This wasn't a decision taken at ministerial level, but I'm not going to second guess what's a very, very difficult operational environment.
Sorcher Eastwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Minister, this is a really difficult issue, and you spoke about people wanting to come to the UK because they had a dream. I want to be really clear. I welcome people who want to come to the UK, who want to live in a way that's reflective of our values, but so often we ask the most of communities who have the least. Do you agree with me that the continued use of public money for asylum hotels poses a risk not just to our politics, but in terms of value for public money and social cohesion?
I would start by saying that I share her spirit, and actually I believe the British public do too. I've seen the British public, whether it's with regards to Syrian refugees, whether it's regards to Home for Ukraine, the Afghan resettlement scheme, British nationals overseas. The British public meet the moment for people who need shelter and show extraordinary capacity for compassion. But there has to be a limit on that, exactly as she says. The assurance I can give her is A, that we are going to break these pull factors that mean that those who don't have a claim, and that is, I have to say, more than half who are assessed who don't have that legitimate reason. We're going to break that reason for them coming. But that in the meantime, in exactly the whole, the spirit that she said with regards to public confidence, that we've removed £1 billion of spend from this for exactly that reason.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK is spending 1/5 of official development assistance on hotel bills. Some of this money was previously used to prevent conflict and to help refugees to find refuge in their own region. I served with an army training regiment at one of the two sites, at Crowborough, and I consider that if it was good enough for us, it is good enough for some of the refugees who are seeking asylum. But can the Minister assure the House that this move to use decommissioned barracks will cost taxpayers less than hotels are currently costing?
Minister.
I mean, the reality is that the unit cost per night is broadly similar. The point is that we have to reduce the number of people in that accommodation. That's how we get value for the taxpayer, and we won't need it at all.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers and his dedication to try and find the answers that we very much need. Whilst it is good to hear that there is a plan to more cost-effectively house these asylum seekers, government must ensure that these do not become states within this state. What steps have been taken to ensure that law and order is carried out in any designated large areas, such as the proposals suggest by the Minister? Thank you.
I'm grateful for that question, and I'd start by acknowledging the honourable gentleman's Herculean work throughout my time in Parliament and before with regards to Christians who are persecuted abroad, so that people don't have to leave their homes. I think that's important work that is shared across this place. You know, I want to be very clear, the rule of law has primacy, is absolute in this country, is the same for all of us. People who come here and want to make their homes here, as the Honourable Lady said previously, they must embed themselves into communities, must reflect our values and behave in those ways.
Points of order come after the statement, I'm afraid. It's related to the statement. Point of order, Mark Francois.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And very briefly, we've just been debating a very important matter of asylum seekers and MOD accommodation. Could you just confirm, as Hansard will indeed, I hope, tomorrow, that in the nearly 37 minutes that we spent debating this very important matter, no member of Reform was in the chamber and indeed made absolutely no contribution whatsoever?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order. However, he will know that is not a matter for the chair. That does conclude the urgent question. We now move on to the statements. I'll give a few moments for the House to settle before I call the Minister. Luke Pollard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I would like to update the House on the UK-Turkey deal to buy 20 British-built Typhoon fighter jets. On Monday, the Prime Minister travelled to Ankara with the Defence Secretary, where he finalised an agreement with President Erdogan for Turkey to purchase 20 British-built Typhoon fighter jets. This is a deal worth £8 billion and is our biggest fighter jet export contract since 2007. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a massive boost for our defence industry, for our economy and for our country. It confirms that defence is an engine for growth. This deal will support 20,000 jobs across 330 British companies UK-wide, and in particular, our deal supports jobs in Lancashire, Bristol, Luton and Scotland for many years to come. It includes nearly 6,000 jobs directly supporting Typhoon programme at BAE Systems sites, particularly at Wharton and Samlesbury, more than 1,100 jobs in the southwest, for example at the Rolls-Royce facility in Bristol, producing modules for the EJ200 jet engines that will power these new Typhoon jets, and over 800 jobs in Scotland, including at Leonardo in Edinburgh, manufacturing cutting-edge radar systems. These are high-value, well-paid, good unionised jobs, the kind of jobs that puts money in working people's pockets, that help revitalise communities and that help deliver on defence as an engine for growth. This deal also preserves our sovereign skills, which underpin our national security and prosperity, so they can be handed down to new generations. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this deal goes far beyond the procurement of Typhoon jets alone. It represents the leading edge of our enhanced strategic partnership between the UK and Turkey. This agreement between our two countries is emblematic of a growing defence and industrial partnership, and will serve as a springboard for deeper collaboration in the future. Turkey is a key NATO ally in a strategically critical part of the world and the gatekeeper to the Black Sea. By equipping it with the top-of-the-range Typhoon fighter jets, the best fourth-generation all-round fighter in the world, this deal strengthens NATO's collective deterrence in a crucial region. It boosts interoperability between our air forces and makes us all safer and more prosperous. This deal comes weeks after Norway chose the UK to supply it with at least 5 Type 26 frigates in a £10 billion deal, the biggest ever warship export deal by value in our history. That contract alone secured 4,000 jobs, including more than 2,000 in Scotland, and supports over 400